Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tales of the Cocktail Full Hands In webinar. My name is Lola Thomas. I'm the Education Manager at Tales of the Cocktail, and I am so thrilled to be here today with y'all. Let's maximize our screens and then get rolling here. So we gather in this space every Monday to discuss topics that are important to bartenders, bar owners, and everybody in the drinks and hospitality industry. And today we're talking about taxes. So it can be a daunting subject, but we have a guest here to help us with the topic. So it's an honor to have you, Debbie Moran, discussing the new legislation related to coronavirus, including stimulus checks, SBA loans, PPP loans, all of that. Thank you for being here to really dive in. So everybody that's tuning in, if you have questions for Debbie, just pop them in the right-hand side of your screen and we'll get to them at the end. So Debbie, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and giving us a little bit of background about what you do.
Okay, thanks, Lola. I'm Debbie Moran. I'm a tax partner at a large Louisiana firm, Hannis T, Bourgeois. We have three offices, and I am in the New Orleans office. And my specialty, I do individual and business taxation issues, and I have a lot of clients specifically in the hospitality industry, hotels, restaurants. I have, small clients that from all levels of the hospitality industry. And like Lola said, I did a little PowerPoint. We'll kind of go through it, and I'm just going to touch on some real overview of all this legislation that's been passed in the last couple of weeks, months. And then I know y'all will have a lot of questions, and I will try to answer every one that I can. And if I can't, you'll see at the end of my presentation is my email address and also my phone number. And you can call me, email me, and I'll get back to you one way or another with an answer for you, okay? All right, so let's see. Lola and I practice this. Let's see if we can make it happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for chat with everybody after as well if they have follow-up questions. So that's great. And Debbie's going to share her screen, and we're going to dive into a little bit of these taxation topics. Okay, perfect.
We practiced, and now what have I done? I messed it up. Just a second, y'all, even though we did practice. Where did that go?
It looks good. I think you need to maximize it.
It's remember I told you before, I'm going to try this real quick again, okay? Because before it comes up in two windows, and I've got to be sure to get the right window. There we go. All right, how is that? Can y'all see that?
That looks great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so, there's been a lot of big words with acronyms. The Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which is the CARES Act, which I'm sure you've heard that term, and the Families First Corona Response Act. Just going to go through real quickly and talk about the major effects for individuals and for businesses, and then we can do some questions afterwards. So for individuals, what the CARES Act did is it created the Advanced Recovery Rebate, which is $1,200 per individual, $500 per child. And it's based on your 2018 tax return or your 2019 return if you filed it. You should be eligible for that money if you're single and you're what they call your adjusted gross income, which is just all your income. If you have W-2 or any kind of earnings, that all adds up to your adjusted gross income. If you're single, you would get the $1,200 per individual unless you made more than $75,000. From $75,000 to $99,000, it's slowly phased out. If you make more than $99,000, you wouldn't get anything. So, you know, for instance, if you made like 85,000, you would still get some, you just wouldn't get the 1,200. And if you're married filing joint, it's 100, if under 150, you're going to get, you know, 1,200 per individual. Up to 198, it would be completely phased out. So if you are married and have 2 kids, you're going to get 2,400 plus another 1,000, you get $3,400. Another thing for individuals is if your tax return, if your adjusted gross income is a negative number, like you're self-employed and your expenses exceed your income, you would have what they call a net operating loss. Those losses can offset future income. But what they've done now is said you can actually take those losses and go back and amend an old return that had income and get money back. So you might be able to get your refund based on those losses earlier. And it used to be that you couldn't reduce your income below 20%, and that's been eliminated. You can, for individuals, you can take up to $100,000 out of a 401k or an IRA, a retirement account, and not pay the penalty. The way it was before, let's say I took $100,000 out of my 401k and I'm not 59 and a half years old. I have to pay tax on that 100,000. And then in addition to that, I would have to pay a $10,000 penalty. That penalty has been removed. So you still got to pay tax on the income. You just don't have to pay the penalty. They have said that you could take that into income over 3 years. In other words, I could elect, instead of showing 100 grand of income on my return for 20, I could show 33, 33, and 33. And that might keep you in a lower bracket. And the only thing you have to show to not have that penalty is that you or your spouse must have contracted the COVID-19 virus, or you had a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 virus, which, you know, most people, I think if you're taking money out of your retirement, you're in that boat. For businesses, there's a lot of credits and things going around. One of the main ones is the employee retention credit. If your business has had a full or partial suspension of business, or just a significant decline in receipts, then if you continue to pay your employees, you can take a tax credit up to 50% of those wages. And that is for anybody that you keep on after March 12th through the end of 2020. And it's refundable. In other words, you can file a form and get that money right away. The businesses also have this net operating loss capability as well, which they did not have before. There's also paid leave for employers. So if you have an employee who is unable to work because of COVID-19 symptoms, or they've been told to quarantine, and this doesn't apply to like the order by the local governors. This would be like if you had been, someone had told you to quarantine because you had been exposed to somebody that had COVID-19. Your employer can continue, the employer can continue to pay that employee up to $511 per day for a maximum of 10 days. And the IRS gives them a credit for that entire amount. So they pay somebody $1,800, they get back $1,800. They also can do that for an employee that's caring for someone who has COVID or has a child out of school. That's a lesser credit. It's up to 2/3 of that employee's regular pay, or $200 per day, a maximum of 10 days. So really both of those are just for 2 weeks time. After that, the child care credit leave kind of comes in, and that's a credit for somebody who has to, if you continue to pay them and they can't work because their child is out of school, you can pay them up to 2/3 their pay, or $200 per day, and that's for 10 weeks. So that's for a little bit longer. For all businesses, and individuals, any income taxes, filings, or payments that were originally due between April 1st, 2020 and July 15th, 2020 has been postponed to July 15th, 2020. So regularly, individuals would have to file and pay by April 15th unless they filed for an extension, and that extension is always an extension to file. It's never an extension to pay. So you didn't have to file an extension. Your return and your payment is now due on July 15th. Now, if you still need time, you can file an extension, and that would give you until October 15th to file. But as of now, you still have to pay by July 15th. For businesses, this would be the same. Most business returns were due March 15th. So an extension, if you didn't file, was probably filed for you, hopefully, by your CPA. And that would give you until September 15th to file your return. And then this extension also applies if you contribute to a Roth or a traditional IRA or some kind of retirement plan. Usually those had to be in by April 15th. So now they don't have to be in until July 15th. This is for federal only. You have to look to your specific state for guidelines. Every state is different, but I would tell you the majority of them have followed the feds on this issue. One of the biggest things, and one of the things most often in the news, is some of the programs that are being administered by the SBA, the Small Business Administration. And there's three major programs available, and that's the Paycheck Protection Program, the Emergency Economic Entry Grant, and the Small Business Debt Relief Program. The one most people are hearing about, I think, is the Paycheck Protection Program, which is what they call the PPP. And to be eligible for that program, you just had to be in business on February 15th of this year. You had to have less than 500 employees, and it was eligible to all businesses, whether you're a corporation, an S corporation, a sole proprietorship, you're self-employed, or nonprofits. I think the most, probably the exception that most people are hearing about in the news is that if you're a restaurant, in the restaurant business, in the food service business, that they instead of looking at 500 employees for your total company, they looked at it per location. So large franchises that some of you've heard in the news were eligible for this program. So this program, as the one that's passed, is out of money. And they are discussing it today in Congress, and they're saying hopefully tomorrow the Senate is going to sign off, and it will be hopefully signed into law by the president. And at that point, they will have a lot more money to fund it. I would tell you from a personal standpoint, about 20% of my clients who applied for this got the money. So that's a pretty small percentage. And these are people who applied as soon as they could. This is administered by banks. So the SBA sent down the rules, but the banks are the ones that make the decisions. And every bank has done something different. The application is standard set by the SBA, but the backup information and the documentation and the calculations required by each bank varied. So depending on what bank you are, they could have said, this is how you do it, or you're not allowed, or things like that. There was a lot of, the rules were changing hourly, and there was a lot of information changing, misinformation on this program. Now that we're about 3 weeks into it, there's been a lot more guidance from the SBA. So, ask me any questions you have on this and I will answer you what I know today. It may change tomorrow. The loan, how the loan is determined. Basically, they take, if you're just a standard business and you have employee payroll, they would take the average wages you paid in the last 12 months, divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2.5. And that would have included health insurance benefits, state and local taxes, and retirement benefits. If you are a self-employed person, if you get a 1099 and you just file your taxes on your regular 1040, if you do that, you fill out a Schedule C, is where your self-employment income is calculated. They took the net amount of that, so your income after expenses divided by 12 times 2.5. In those calculations, note that payroll for any one individual could not be over $100,000. Once you get the money, if you're lucky enough to get your money, that money that you receive will actually be forgiven and you would not have to pay it back and it would not be taxable. So it's free money. But you have to use it per the guidelines that the SBA has set out. And one of those is that 75% of the money has to be spent on payroll. And payroll would include health and retirement benefits. The other 25% would have to be spent on rent, utilities, or any debt that your company already had before February 15th. So even though they calculate it using the payroll, it can be spent on these other items. Anything that is not forgiven turns into a 2-year loan with payments deferred for 6 months at an interest rate of 1%. Still pretty good deal. If you had some higher interest debt that you would have difficulty, you could do that. And if you take the money and then you don't use it in this way and you don't want it as debt, you would just have to give it back. Again, this is being administered by every single bank in the country. So even though the SBA has given us rules for forgiveness, and it's not nearly as simple as this, there's lots of caveats about having to keep your employees, the same number of employees and things like that. I'm afraid that every bank is going to calculate it differently. And I'm also afraid that, people will get this money and then they're thinking it's going to be forgiven the way that they're spending it, and it won't be. One thing I think will be good is that the banks will want to forgive this money. They do not want to have to administer the loan itself, because this is a real quick turnaround. You have 8 weeks to spend this money. So I think the banks would love to just be done with it at that point. So I think that if they can, they are going to try to forgive it. The other one I think a lot of people heard about is the Emergency Economic Injury Grant. Originally, it looked like you could go to the SBA website and apply for this, and you would get $10,000, and it's a grant. It doesn't have to be paid back. The money ran out so fast that they basically cut it back to you would get $1,000 per employee. So if you put in there you had 2 employees on the application, you would get $2,000. I applied for this for my husband's business almost the first day. I have not gotten anything. I know a lot of people that have gotten 1,000 or 2,000 or 4,000 or what, it's all over the board. Anything you get, it does reduce what you would be eligible for in the PPP. When you're applying for that grant, you're actually in the process applying for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. You'll hear that called an EDL. You just have to have less than 500 employees. It's all business types. I can tell you that how much they'll lend you, they're going to, if And when they get back to you and say you're eligible, they're going to tell you how much that they would lend you. And then you decide. And these are 30-year loans at 3.75% interest. That's a really quick summary of so much information that's out there. I'm going to go back now and open it up to questions. You will see my email address. And looking at this, I see it's my office phone number, which I'm working remotely. But I will, if you email me, I promise to get back to you and try to help you with your questions. Right.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'm going to put Debbie's email address in the chat right now as well, if you guys want to save it. She has graciously offered to answer extra questions if you have them after. But while we still have you, let's get to a couple of the questions folks have asked right now.
Okay.
So I see Henry Lopez here said, my bar in Brooklyn does not qualify or bridge loans with the SBA because payroll has been off the books. I'm trying to at least get an EIDL loan, but new applications are not yet available. What are my options for assistance? We are a 100% minority-owned business.
Henry, yeah, so a lot of people that have been getting paid or being paid that weren't through, the authorized channels are having difficulty because you don't have any way to substantiate those wages. I don't know the specifics as far as the SBA and being a minority-owned business, what's available. All I can tell you is just go to that SBA.gov site every day. Literally every day they're putting new information, new applications. I mean, it literally is changing on an hourly basis. So I think, the EIDL loan might be your best bet. I know that they were taking applications, so I know that you're saying that it's not available yet, but I know that I applied for one for my husband's small business. So I would just recommend going again to SBA.gov and reading whatever's out there.
Thanks, Debbie. You can see, all right, there's some additional questions. Would a business be able to retroactively use the PPP loan to reimburse the business the cost of their payroll prior to the date the money was received, or does it need to be spent on the current payroll?
It has to be spent in the 8 weeks following the loan origination date. So, and there's some questions there because, so let's say, I had a payroll from April 15th to April, 21st, right? I had a week's payroll and I got my money on the 20th, but I didn't pay my payroll to the 25th. The way the act reads is you have to have incurred and paid it after getting the loan, right? What I'm telling all my people to do is, when you submit that forgiveness calculation to your bank, if you paid it after you got your loan, you put it on there. The banks are going to be hoping to forgive this. So since the legislation, and there's so many questions out there, but it definitely would not cover something you incurred and paid before you got the cash. It has to be after.
Oh, thank you. We have a new question from Connie saying, hi, Debbie, I've been a bartender for the last 6 years at a bar that has me listed as a 1099 contract employee. We were talking about this earlier. What are my best options as a self-employed bartender?
So if you have been getting a 1099, so there's a couple of things. You can, if you've been filing a tax return and you've been putting that 1099 income on there and paying tax on it, you would be eligible for a PPP loan yourself based on that net income. So you would go, most likely you have to go to the bank that you already bank with. Most of the banks are not even making it eligible except to their current clients. And if you didn't have a business account, you're going to even have a harder problem. I would say your best bet for money right now is to apply for unemployment. If you're not getting paid, usually self-employed people cannot apply for unemployment because you don't have an employer that's paying into the system. But here in Louisiana, and every state's different, but my understanding is, and the feds are helping out. So I have people I know who are getting like $107 from Louisiana, but they're getting $600 a week from the feds through unemployment. So $700 a week is a lot, you might be able to eat, might be able to pay half your rent, So, and most of them, every unemployment state is different, but you go to your state's unemployment site and they are trying to update their sites to handle self-employed people. But most of them, my understanding is where it has employers, add yourself. Like if you have a W-2, that's going to automatically pop up as like compensation you've received in the past. If you don't have that and it says, do you have any other employers? You put yourself, and then you would attach your 1099 for some kind of proof.
This is another question we talked about earlier. This is from Timos. Hi, Debbie. Are you going to discuss at all the W-8 BEN application for refund relief for internationals based in the UK over here?
Lola and I talked about this topic when we were deciding what to talk about. It's really complicated and it's a little bit outside of kind of what we were trying to talk about today. But if you'll email me and send me your specific question, I will look into it for you. The W-8 BEN is kind of, if you come to the United States and you work here and you don't file tax returns, whoever's paying you is required to withhold taxes out of your payment because, they want their piece, right? So, and they know if you go back to the UK, they're not going to get it. So they're trying to get it on the front end. But if you'll send me like your specific situation, I will try to answer that for you.
Thank you so much. Another question here is, so what if you owe taxes from prior years? How does that?
As far as you're getting your stimulus, so they will not take your stimulus to pay old tax debt.
Okay.
If you have a payment plan with the IRS, they are not supposed to take this. And then, and on a quick note on that, if you have a payment plan and it's being like direct debited out of account, so you feel like, oh, the IRS has my banking information, they will not use payment banking information to deposit your stimulus check. So even though you may feel like they have your information, if you're using that to pay them, they will not use that. So as of today, I went to the irs.gov website and they did have a place where I could put in my banking information, which up until, I don't know when that changed, a few days ago, that wasn't available. But they won't take your refund. They won't take your refund, your stimulus.
Good to know. Thank you. If y'all have any other questions, please feel free to add them on the right. I did want to ask you, Debbie, about, I know some folks who were regular W-2 employees lost their jobs and now are doing something else and are getting a 1099. How does that change the way that they file their taxes this year?
So it is very different. So if you get a W-2, when you get a W-2, if you look, your employer is withholding FICA and Medicare, and that's 7.65% of your wages. And when you file when your employer pays that taxes they've withheld out of your check, when they pay it to the IRS, they match it. So the IRS gets 15.3% on your wages. When you're a 1099 employee or contractor, you have to pay both halves. So you could potentially, let's say you made $10,000 on your 1099, didn't have any expenses, okay? Even though you would pay zero in income taxes, you would still pay $1,530 in self-employment taxes, okay? So anybody that has a 1099 needs to be very careful. I mean, it's not like we all have a lot of money to set aside right now, but be aware that come next April 15th, you're going to owe 15.3% of your net income. So if you make 10 grand, if you had a couple thousand in expenses, you'd pay on the 8. Okay. And, just quick aside right now with, so many people in situations right now where they're struggling, don't be afraid of the IRS. The worst thing you can do with the IRS is ignore them. Okay. The IRS will work with you on a payment plan. They are not coming to get you. They are not going to put you in jail. You just need to, you should always file, even if you owe and you can't pay, file your return. There's all these penalties associated with not filing. If you file, if the penalties associated with not filing are more than not paying. So file your return, reach out to the IRS for a payment plan. They'll let you pay anything over 5-6 years. You can pay them $20 a month, so I just want to always tell people that don't be so afraid that you don't act. File your return.
Thank you, Debbie. That is good advice. I think we have one more question. It is, what about gifts received? I think we talked about this, like if you got a grant from the USBG or from another nonprofit.
My understanding is they are not taxable. If you get a gift or a grant and it's not for any work you've done, it's just to help you out through hard times, it is not taxable.
Good news. A little bit of good news.
A little bit of good news.
Okay, awesome. Well,
I think, Lola, one of the other things that you had said, some of your members, one thing that they asked about is if they get a 1099, but the income is in a box called other income as opposed to in the non-employee comp. And I wanted to, that's kind of the same conversation. If that other income is in other income, it's not subject to that 15.3% FICA and Medicare. So that's a big difference. That non-employee box means something very different than the other income box. So just be aware, if you get a 1099 and it's in the other income box, it means it's not subject to that self-employment tax of 15.3%.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Another question. Where do we enter our bank account info on the IRS website? I assume that's related to the stimulus, receiving the
Correct.
stimulus.
So before the last few days, there wasn't really any place to enter it. When I went in this morning to irs.gov, before it kept telling me that my eligibility was undetermined. Like so many people got that. And you know what it meant? It meant that they hadn't got to you yet. That's all it meant. It didn't mean that you hadn't filed or you weren't eligible or anything, because I know people who are eligible, they got that message. Today, when I went in, I put my own information in there and it said, okay, you're eligible. And then it said, if you give me this information off your 18 return, I'll let you put in your banking information. So, when you're on the site, get your 18 return in front of you. One of the things they're going to ask you for is your adjusted gross income. It's a line item on your tax return. Just look for that verbiage, adjusted gross income. They ask you for that. And then they ask you, like, did you owe us or did we owe you? And what was that amount? And when you answer those correctly, it will give you a place to put in your banking information. I don't think there was a place before. Yeah,
Okay,
AGL.
awesome. So just go on to irs.gov to find that, where we can determine if we're eligible. Is that correct?
Correct. And Lola and I talked about this earlier. irs.gov. Honestly, us in the profession do not have a lot more information than is just on that site. It's changing so quickly that it's not something that we have experience with, and we know any ins and outs that nobody else knows. At this point, we're all kind of struggling to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, I have learned so much today. This has been super helpful. Thank you, Debbie. This is one question which I think actually is good. Are there any scams we should be aware of? Because I've heard of some of this.
Okay. First of all, the IRS will never, ever, ever call you. Ever. They've never called me. I've been doing this for 30 years. They do not call people. So anytime anybody calls you and asks you for any information or says you have tax debts, and if you don't call them right away or you don't give them this information right away, they're going to send a sheriff to your house, or not going to happen. Just be very careful that the only time that you should ever click on a link or give anybody your social security number or something is you need to make sure that it's from the IRS. And like I said, the IRS doesn't email you either. The only way the IRS is ever going to contact you is by paper. So any email, any phone call, text says they're with the IRS, they are not with the IRS. So just do not respond to those, and do not be afraid. Don't get upset, because it's very upsetting when somebody calls and says they're with the IRS and you owe them all this money that you didn't. Well, you don't. I mean, you might owe them money, but they're not them.
That's good advice. I mean, man, scammers, not cool.
No, it's not cool. So like I said, the IRS is not going to email you. The SBA has sent out some emails, but they basically are just informational. They're never asking you for any financial or like your social or your EIN or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think we are wrapping up. Thank you so much. Do you have any kind of final words you want to share with the group, or any advice to the individuals and business owners here today?
I mean, I'm really, I'm glad to have been able to answer some of your questions. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm available. I might not get back to you right away, but I will promise I will get back to you. And, I guess everybody just stay as safe and healthy as possible. And hopefully, I know we'll all get through this. And, I just wish the best for everybody out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for being here. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to share this information. And this is going to be available on the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation YouTube channel if you want to share it with your friends for a little bit of additional info, anybody tuning in here today. So thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.